Hello, I'm Dr. David DeRose. And a lot of people, when they know that I'm a physician and I've been seeing patients for many years, I'm a writer, radio host, people say, well, what is it like to sit in the doctor's seat? Don't you see all kind of fascinating things walking through your doors? Well, depends on your perspective. Sometimes what we see as physicians is downright sad and tragic. I think of some years ago when a gentleman came into my office for the very first time. I had great difficulty understanding anything he was trying to communicate. He was paralyzed on half his body. He was in a wheelchair. He was there with his son. His speech, terribly slurred. You guessed it, he had had a stroke. But the shocking thing about his history was he hadn't just had the stroke yesterday or the week before or the year before. He'd been living like that for 20 years. And why I say that's so shocking is because a lot of times when people hear about things like stroke and heart attack, they say, well, Dr. DeRose, that's not all that bad a way to go. I mean, my mom had cancer. That was a long, lingering death. I would rather just have a stroke and die. Well, a lot of people just have a stroke and survive. The good news in this series, The Missing Link, Connecting You to Better Health, is we're teaching you how to avoid some of the leading killers, some of the leading cripplers in the world. Today we're looking at stroke, what you can do to prevent it. And the missing link, the answer, is actually improve your blood fluidity. That's right, if you've heard me speak on this topic before, we're talking about something that I call the Methuselah Factor. And the Methuselah Factor really is all about blood fluidity. Let me bring you back in time some years ago to researchers in Hungary. Dr. Laszlo Sapari and his colleagues were looking at connections between stroke and blood fluidity. And what they found was very compelling. They found no matter what indicators you looked at as far as good circulation, the worse those indicators, the greater your risk of stroke. Let me give you some examples. They looked at something called hematocrit. Hematocrit is technically the percentage of your blood that is made up of red blood cells. If you have a higher hematocrit, you can carry more oxygen. Over the years, some athletes have been preoccupied with this and have tried to boost their hematocrit. But here's the problem. Hematocrit is good to a point. As the hematocrit gets higher, your blood fluidity suffers and it increases your risk of things like a stroke. You remember those headlines? In fact, I was just speaking to a professional group actually earlier this week. And as I was talking with them about this subject, one of them said, yeah, I remember that. Back in the 80s, there were elite cyclists. They were dying. They were blood doping, raising their hematocrits, and then their blood was more likely to clot. They were having strokes and heart attacks in the heat of a race or right after. The Pari's colleagues found that not only hematocrit, that indicator of blood fluidity, was linked to strokes, but they found that other things like fibrinogen, a clotting protein, higher levels increase risk of stroke. They measure blood viscosity. That's another measure of the thickness of your blood. Thinner blood, lower viscosity, better, less stroke. You say, okay, so I got the connection. Hemorrheology, blood fluidity is important. If I want to avoid a stroke, I want more fluid blood. What can I do about it? Well, some of you know I've written a book that is focused on this. It's called the Methuselah Factor. Sure, you can get the book. Sure, you can go through the whole 30-day program. But my goal is to give you something right now that you can do that can make a difference. And you want to know what it is? It's control stress better. You say, oh, well, great, thanks. I didn't know that I shouldn't control stress better for my health. No, let me tell you something very specific you can do. It's smile. Smile. I mean, this is crazy. Let me tell you about some research. And I cite it right here on page 242. This is just amazing. This is a medical study. The title of the study, Grin and Bear It, the influence of manipulated facial expression on the stress response. What these researchers did was they had people smile, even if they didn't feel like smiling. And you know what happened? Listen to this. When they were doing a stressful task, if they were smiling, forcing themselves to smile, their stress hormones went up less. And if your stress hormones don't go up so much, it helps keep your blood more fluid. Now, if that's not crazy, you got to hear this. This is research out of England. They actually looked at Botox injections and whether it affected people's moods and how they were dealing with stress. This is crazy. If you get Botox injections that target facial wrinkles that are involved in frowning, okay? So you're getting injections that take away those frown lines, you know what happens? Your mood improves, your stress decreases. But if you get Botox injections on those crow's feet, sometimes they're called laughter lines, your mood deteriorates. That's right. That's right. Increased depression scores when crow's feet were injected with Botox. Here's the thing you can do. As we're talking about stress management, improving your blood fluidity, simply smile more. It's one of the keys to better stress control, better blood fluidity, and less strokes. I'm Dr. David DeRose. The missing link connecting you to better health is better blood fluidity. Simple things that you can do.